Have you ever played a game that feels like a dream you're not sure you were supposed to wake up from? I don't mean that in the wow, what a beautiful experience kind of way. I mean the kind of dream where everything is quiet, hauntingly beautiful, and just slightly off. Like you're walking through someone else's memory, or maybe their guilt. That's Shadow of the Colossus. Now, normally I talk about games that are heavy on character, dialogue, or choices. Games that try to impress you with the weight of their story. But this one strips it all down. No towns, no side quests, no enemies, just 16 giants standing between you and whatever it is you think you're saving. It's kinda like Legend of Zelda, if the game didn't hold your hand, left you alone with your thoughts, and told you, good luck, try not to destroy yourself in the process. You are a guy named Wander. You have a horse, a sword, a girl who no longer breathes, and a deal with something ancient and unknowable that promises the impossible. Bring her back. All you have to do is slay 16 Colossi, creatures so massive, so majestic, that killing them feels less like heroism and more like desecration. Why do this? Slaying them will cause their associated statues to crumble. Ironically, they're called idols. It's just part of the deal. But no one's there to question you. There's no cheering crowd, no villain, just you, the wind, and the sound of hooves across a cursed paradise. The Forbidden Lands. And right from the start, things get interpretive. See, the game never tells you why this world exists the way it does. It doesn't explain its ruins. The story itself doesn't explain who these colossi are or why they need to die. It just lets you act and live with it. And somehow, that makes it insanely powerful. It forces you to fill in the gaps with your own meaning. This video is me doing exactly that. My take, my lens. But just to be clear, this isn't the interpretation. It's an interpretation. Yours might be different. It probably is different, and I'd love to read about it in the comments. But the more I sat with this game, the more it stopped feeling like a love story to me. It didn't feel like love conquers death. It felt more like a quiet, unraveling descent. A psychological allegory where grief becomes something darker. Something that starts out noble, but slowly mutates. And I started asking myself, what if this isn't about saving someone? What if it's about refusing to let go? What if the so-called purpose, the mission, the journey, isn't redemption, but rationalization? Because no matter what type of loss somebody endures, whether it's a hard-hitting breakup or the death of somebody close to you, sometimes grief can become the story we tell ourselves when we can't bear to confront the truth underneath. When Shadow of the Colossus begins, it doesn't open with logic. There's no grand exposition dump or noble speech about destiny. It opens with silence, with ritual, with a boy on a horse carrying the body of a girl into a cursed land, as if he's the only person left alive who believes death is negotiable. There's a stillness to that moment, a kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. It's aching. I didn't think about it then, but every time you boot up the game, it reminds you where it started. And that's the point where I got the slight nudge that this wasn't a story about love. Not really. It was about refusal. Wander doesn't cry, he doesn't scream, he doesn't fall apart in front of her body. Instead, he goes straight to the altar like he's already made up his mind, and he sets her down like she's just sleeping. I think that's denial. We talk about the stages of grief like they're clean, clinical steps. But denial's messy. It doesn't always look like someone curled up on the floor refusing to believe what's happened. Sometimes it looks like a person doing everything they can to not stop moving, to not sit still long enough to hear what their heart's actually saying. Wander isn't driven by reason. If he were, he wouldn't be here. The Forbidden Lands are forbidden for a reason. There are ancient seals, lost warnings, and a disembodied voice that says, "We are the one known as Dormin." Now, I'm no expert on mythology or religious lore, but I understand that there's heavy mythological symbolism here. And, to me, it also feels like a giant red flag. But Wander commits to it anyway. He chooses to believe. Not because it makes sense, but more like it hurts too much not to believe. It's never spoken outright, but it's clear there's some form of love here. But love isn't always the whole story. Because when you're grieving, love can start to wear a mask. And sometimes behind that mask is fear, or helplessness, or guilt you can't even name yet. And maybe that's what this is. Maybe he isn't trying to bring her back because he can't live without her. Maybe he's trying to bring her back because he can't live with himself. Because if you love someone and they died, and you think maybe, just maybe, you could have stopped it, then bringing them back isn't just love. It's penance. It's bargaining disguised as hope. And you can choose to keep telling yourself you're doing it for them, so you don't have to ask the real question. Are you doing it to make the pain go away, or to avoid what it's trying to tell you? Because at a certain point, grief can become obsession, and obsession needs a purpose. Something righteous, something pure, even if it's a lie, even if it corrupts you. As long as it feels like you're doing the right thing, even if that right thing is destroying these idols, even if that right thing becomes the thing that destroys you. It didn't hit me right away, but at some point in the game, like way into the game, I looked back. The first Colossus, the one with the club and the fur-lined legs. He's massive. Well, they all are, but this is the first time you experience this. The first confrontation. And he doesn't charge. He doesn't threaten. He just exists. And I'm the one who shows up with a glowing sword and a mission. I tell myself it's a boss fight, that it's what I'm supposed to do, that it's necessary. And then what happens? The giant falls, slow, agonizing, majestic. And just as I start to process what I've done, they appear. Streams of shadows, sharp like guilt itself, shoot into Wander's body. He collapses in pain, and not the noble kind. It looks like punishment, like judgment. And then it cuts to a loading screen that feels like a portal or wormhole or something. And you're back at the temple again. Unconscious, splayed on the stone, like a body being re-offered to the gods. That cycle never changes. Defeat a Colossus, get impaled by the shadows, get dragged back to the temple like you're being claimed. It's not a celebration. It's a haunting, a ritual. And maybe that's what this really is. A ritual of guilt. Because as you go on, the Colossi start to feel like they become more mournful. They don't really get more evil, they get more tragic. Some of them are just there, wandering the ruins, soaring through the sky, sitting in the dark. They don't scream in rage. They groan like the last breath of something ancient that was never meant to be disturbed. Every fight starts to feel like a funeral I've turned into a battlefield. And the thing is, Wander never changes course. No matter how mournful or passive these creatures are, he just keeps going, even when his body starts to betray him. Maybe it's just in my head, but especially closer to the end, there's this sense of decay. His eyes have sunken. The shadows are under his skin. Instead of your typical hero, he's starting to look like something unraveling, like the ritual is carving pieces from him, inside and out. But he never turns around, never questions it, and neither did I, until the end, but that's for later. The game gives you no other choice. You can explore, sure. The Forbidden Lands is massive and is beautiful. But progress? Aside from trophies or achievements, there are no side quests, no dialogue options, no turning back, just your sword, your horse, and the next Colossus. You have to keep going. And that's when the guilt starts to feel familiar. Because how many times have we told ourselves this is just the way it has to be? That what we're doing is our responsibility, not desperation. When we bury guilt deep enough, it doesn't really disappear, and it might mutate into destiny, into purpose, into this sacred cause we have to finish. Because if we don't, we'd have to admit we were never doing it for the right reasons. And still, each death is presented like progress. The fall, the mournful music, the spectacle, the slow motion tragedy. It looks amazing, but that's the trick. Is the game turning guilt into something cinematic? Something to admire? And every time those black shadows pierce you and drag you back to the temple, you start to wonder, is this salvation? Or a noble reckoning? Or did I only convince myself it's noble? What if that temple isn't a safe place? What if it's a stage? Is this majestic world standing in awe of my greatness, or silently applauding my descent? There's something cruel about how beautiful this game is. You ride through golden fields, beneath towering arches carved by time. The wind hums, the light shifts across the cliffs, and for a while, you forget. You forget why you're here. You forget what you've done. That's the trap. Because this game doesn't overwhelm you with sound or story. In fact, it practically starves you. No dialogue, no explanations, just you, your thoughts, and a world that's so stunningly desolate, it truly feels forbidden. And when you finally find the next Colossus, massive, slow, dignified, it doesn't feel like murder. It feels like a myth, like you're part of something ancient, something grand. That's the illusion. Because what looks like silence might actually be something closer to absence, a vacuum where morality should be. And that's how self-delusion slips in, quietly, beautifully, and without resistance. No one is there to tell you you're wrong. No one cries, no one begs. The Colossi don't plead, they mourn. And you interpret that however you need to because that's all you can do. Even Dormin, your one source of direction, speaks in riddles, fragmented voices, ancient metaphors. It sounds spiritual, noble, like you're fulfilling a prophecy, not undoing the fabric of something sacred. And so you keep going, because the game feels like it's telling you you're righteous. It rewards you with vistas, orchestras, and solemn gravitas. And we've been conditioned to trust those things. We think beauty equals truth. That emotional music means we're on the right path. But near the end, the mask starts to slip. Wander is breaking down. And still, the game doesn't stop you, it doubles down. The final Colossus is like a god among gods, apocalyptic, resplendent, terrifying. The music swells, the storm rolls in, and when you finally strike the last blow, the black shadows don't just pierce him this time. They consume him. Wander becomes something else, not a hero, not a martyr, something corrupted. The ritual is complete. Mono wakes up, but Wander is gone, or what's left of him isn't something she could even speak to. And no one tells you if it was worth it, because that's the price of believing that beauty makes things right. Sometimes we're so enchanted by how things feel, we forget to ask what they mean. We let music replace conscience, we let silence stand in for peace, and we call it purpose, even as we fall apart. So maybe this was never a story about love, maybe not even about grief. Maybe this was a story about how far we'll go to justify ourselves, and how the world will make it look beautiful while we burn. So here's the question that haunts me now. What happens when you mistake destruction for devotion? What happens when guilt wears the robes of destiny and no one's left to stop you? Because when all the noise is gone, when the idols are destroyed and the music fades, you're left with only one thing: the shape of who you became. When I look back at Wander's story, I don't just see the ruins or the fallen Colossi. I don't even see the girl on the altar. What I see is a warning, softly spoken, wrapped in silence, hidden in beauty. Because Wander's story isn't just tragic because of what he did, we also understand why he did it. He loved her, he couldn't let go, and that made him human. But it didn't make him right. His grief is real, his love is sincere, and that's what makes this a dangerous story, because sincerity feels like enough. It feels like justification, like if your pain is honest, then what you do with it must be valid. But it's not, because sincerity isn't salvation. And when we chase meaning through destruction, when we let our pain shape our purpose, we don't become heroes, we just become lost. Wander wanted to bring someone back to life, but in the end, he couldn't even hold on to himself. And the worst part? This world allowed this to happen. The game hands you a sword, a horse, a prayer, and then it gives you beauty. That's the bait. That's the misdirection. Majestic landscapes, sacred ruins, haunting music. It makes the descent feel like destiny. But all it really does is dress up the fall. That almost makes this game kind of like a mirror. A foggy one, yes, but if you find your way past the blur, the mirror reveals hidden truths. Because if we're not careful, we'll see our own justification staring back at us, our own quiet lies, our own desperate need for purpose at any cost. So this is a warning about what happens when you refuse to confront guilt, when you wrap grief in beauty and call it love, when you mistake the silence of the world for permission to keep going. If you haven't played Shadow of the Colossus, I truly hope you do. Let it speak to you. Let it say nothing and everything all at once. Take your time. Listen carefully to what isn't being said. And if you have already played it, tell me what you saw. Your interpretation is probably completely different. That's the brilliance of it. This game doesn't hand you answers, it hands you a question and walks away. Massive thanks to Team Ico and everyone who poured themselves into something this quiet and devastating. It's so much more than art. How do you really describe this? Well, it's a slow motion collapse wrapped in sunlight. And in the end, maybe that's what makes it so unforgettable. Because sometimes the most dangerous paths are the ones that look the most beautiful on the way down. Thanks for watching.